training, which is on Saturday, which Nicole will be delivering. It's the third part of the Jedi series. We shall all be graduating to Jedis then, I guess, by the third one. Yes. Would you like to say a word about that, Nicole?
Come, especially if you set New Year's resolutions and you have a hard time keeping them.
All right. So for those of you who didn't hear that, if you have New Year's resolutions and you have a hard time keeping them, you should come to the Impact Training. That's this Saturday from 9 to noon. Then the next event on the calendar would be the Omega 2, which starts the following Thursday. So
the 17th.
The 17th, thank you. I just got scared thinking it was this Thursday going, wait, I'm not ready. So next Thursday is the next one. And then another Monday night workshop will be on the 21st, which I'll be delivering, and I have no idea what the topic is. I wrote it down somewhere. It's in the newsletter. And then, for those of you who have been curious, there is no Omega 1 in February. Typically, we have an Omega 1 in every single month. This year, we're doing something different. We are changing the schedule around. February is the month that we have an Omega 4, which is 2 weekends, so there is no Omega 1 in February. So the next available Omega 1 is March, is it 3rd to the 7th, is that correct? Looking.
7th through the 10th.
7th through the 10th, that was close. So March 7th through the 10th is the very next Omega 1 that we'll be having. This Omega 2 that's coming up, I believe is still booked, is that correct? It's still full, and there is a waiting list, so I'm pleased to hear about that. Now, tonight's topic is on weakness, part 2. How many people were here for the weakness part 1? Darn, do you remember anything? Good. Okay. Huh?
Those of us that watched it on
If you watched it on YouTube, did you remember anything that I talked about?
I remember something about an issue that I'm dealing with. Somebody's staying at my house right now.
Okay. So you don't have to do the first part to understand this part tonight. I originally started doing this off of one of George's papers. When he passed on, he left me a 4-drawer file cabinet of handwritten or typed material. And he was so priceless, so organized. I love organized people. And he would have things like workshops, super workshops, the best workshops. Like he had them in little categories, and then everything's titled. So I came across this one. It was under the file of inspirations, where he just had a series of collections of things he had written. And these were, it was actually 2 pages, 2-sided. And as I was reading through them, I thought, well, this would actually make a really good workshop. So last month, or December, I think it was, when I delivered the first part, I only used the front page of his notes because I just took off. So tonight, I attempted to use the rest of his material. Some of it was, I changed around, and some of them I updated it. So I'm just taking a jump in here. I like using George's materials as a starting point, and then I just add my own in here. So it's called Weakness. The quote that I use from George says, "The discovery of our weakness is personal growth." A lot of people don't like to see that. They don't like to be exposed. We don't like to see our own weaknesses. We'd rather focus on our strengths, which is a positive attribute if we can rely or recognize our strengths, as long as we do recognize the weaknesses as well. But there are those who only want to focus on the strengths and not look at our weaknesses. It's our weaknesses that are diminishing us. So it's very valuable to me to discover my weaknesses, not to wallow in the weaknesses, because that also will diminish me, but to be aware of it. So from the last paper, one of the things that I mentioned was that if you, and I don't have my little thingy, but if you were to put a magnet underneath a piece of paper and then pour some filings on top of the paper, the metal filings will show the shape of the magnet that's underneath it. So even though you can't see the magnet, the metal will the filings will expose the exact shape that's underneath it. Now he used this as an illustration to talk about the shape of the things that we are presenting. So even though you can't see my thoughts, they take the shape of what's happening in my life. So you can really, many times you'll probably hear me say, you can tell a lot about a person by listening to the words that they choose. That's like the metal filings exposing somebody. Our words are depicted by our thinking. Our thinking is derived from what we see and what we hear. So when someone chooses words, if you listen to their words carefully, you can pretty much tell what their thought process is. Now, unfortunately, there's a great field out there of people who, NLP, is that correct? NLP, where they work on mimicking so you can sell. So they use this technique to take advantage of people, which we talked about last time as well, being taken advantage of. The weakness of excuses, we ended up talking about lying, because lying ends up being something that we do without even recognizing it. We become so habitual at it. Lying could be something as simple as a little white lie, or it could be a huge lie. Lying is also, we define this as lying is seen as anything other than the truth or reality. So anytime you see something that is not real, that's a lie. We connect this to the arrest records. Remember in Omega 1 we talk about arrest records. And I always tell the story about being attacked by a rooster, and then from that point on, all birds are evil. That's a lie. But I believed it to be true, so therefore I was living for 40 years a lie. I lived a lie. So that could be, it wasn't I intentionally lied, it's just that was my arrest record. I believed the arrest record rather than the reality. All birds are not evil, just blue jays. So, blue jays they intentionally attack you.
Just you.
I have a 0 on the top of my head, a little target. Come get me. So, George talked about the idea of lying and also equated it to excuses. If you're an individual who connects excuses to things, it's never your fault that something occurs. If you have the excuse, there's always the traffic, or your parents, your upbringing, your job, you didn't get enough sleep, you didn't eat right. Well, if you're a person who's filled with excuses, it's the same thing. You're not claiming your own personal responsibility. You're relying on excuses. That's a weakness. People who are built with excuses have no, I want to say inner core, but no strength. When I think about the strength inside of an individual, I often think of a pole, like a steel pole. That's solid, and you can hold on to it. It's a good grounding for you. But people who are weak inside, it's as if you apply heat to metal, heat to iron. What happens to iron if you apply heat to it? It melts, and that's exactly what occurs. Anytime that you cross reality or pollute it, it pollutes your life. So the weakness of excuses and lying leads to corruption and pollution in your life. That's what George says. That the weakness of excuses and lying leads to corruption and pollution in your life. So naturally my thought goes to one of the most sought after fields of lying would be, or not the sought after, the most predominant field of lying would be politics. Can we assume that's correct? Unfortunately, back in the original days, when the democratic system was set up, it was not based on lying. It was not based on corruption. It was for the good of all. So our forefathers put together this political system that we have now with the intention of everyone having equality. With the introduction of lying and excuses, we now have one of the most corrupt environment or systems in our country. I feel a little odd saying that, but it does seem to be true that politicians are one of the most corrupt systems that we have in our country. But you can think about it, it could also expand to all the other countries as well. It might be one of the most corrupt systems around the world. I'm trying to think of a country that does not have a corrupt political system, a predominant country that does not have a political corrupt system, and I'm not informative enough to be aware of the many systems that occur. I think Canada's pretty clean. I'm assuming Canada's pretty clean. I think Australia might be pretty clean as well. I know of the corruption that exists in India. That India, from what all my readings, India seems to be the most corrupt country on the planet. So that one. For those of you who knew George, a few years back, maybe 10 years ago, we had this little Indian woman come to the program, and she told us stories of horror and just abuse, but she had a passport that showed that she had worked for this very significant politician or leader in India, and that she was very wealthy. He had left her all this, and she had all the paperwork and the documentations of all this money, but it was tied up in family affairs and she just needed a little bit of help, but she promised George, she would donate it all to Omega. All to Omega. Now, my mind went, red flag! Do not trust this woman! But George, you know, granted, a spiritual leader, but also not the wisest businessman. For those of you who knew George, he was not a very good businessman. Great spiritual man, but not businessman. He thought, okay, well, you know, this might be an opportunity for Omega to make some money, a nice donation. And it all looked official. He didn't go in there blind. He took the paperwork to somebody who was aware of documentation, to lawyers, and they said, yeah, this pretty much looks real. And so we started a long process of sending her back and forth to India to go to the courts, and he'd have conversations with the judges. And I'd be sitting in the back of my mind saying, how do you know this is really a judge you're talking to? Seriously, it could be her brother. How do you know? And this went on for months, and we had a confrontation. It was one of the few confrontations we had. Not really a confrontation, but a disagreement. I disagreed with him. I saw him not only putting his money into her, but he started soliciting other people who we knew had money, and George doesn't solicit. And so I saw a contradiction right there. And he would always say, well, you know, what if this is karma and I'm paying back a debt? Okay, well, that's nice, but what if it's karma and you're now being indebted and you won't be paid back till next lifetime? What about that? And then he would say, well, how come you don't trust? Okay, I don't trust. So then I would say, well, how do I trust when my inner voice tells me not to trust? So I'm having a contradiction. We went round and round for this for a while until finally he said, well, why can't you just simply accept that this is the decision I'm making? Okay, fine. So that's where I ended up, begrudgingly. I accepted his decision. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to accept him, then I should support him. And if he believes that this, I don't know, if he believes that this woman will manufacture what she says, fine. So I gave some of my money in as well. And so here's me doing the actions, but there's also me on the outside looking, going, I'm watching people pay for her rent. I'm watching them pay for her electricity, paying for her clothes, paying for her groceries, driving, she didn't have a car, driving her everywhere, flying her back and forth to India. What is this woman giving in return? That's me as the observation. And then me in here saying, all right, I may not understand the whole picture, I'm going to just completely surrender to the process. If this is what George is going to do, I'm going to surrender. Even though I'm saying red flag, I'm surrendering. And once I surrendered to the process, I found very intriguing that this woman all of a sudden started to, hit on me is not the correct word, but latch on to me and try to tell me stories that she thinks that I would be moved by. Obviously, she doesn't know me. So she's telling me these stories of her, terrible to her, and I'm like, that's nothing. I mean, I don't say that out loud. I just go, oh, really? Are you ready to go? Like, I go to pick her up, and I should also mention she was an alcoholic, raging alcoholic. So I get a phone call, oh, my ex-husband's breaking down the door. So she lives in Mesa, I'm in Phoenix. He's breaking down the door, and I hear screaming, and I hear banging, and I'm like, oh, God. So I drive all the way out here with my Louisville Slugger in the back of my car, New Yorker. So I drive all the way out here, I show up, and there she is, the door's wide open, and she's got these two women in there, and they're chit-chatting, having a little party. I'm a little confused. I walk in and I say, her name, where's your husband? Oh, he left. Really? What was all the screaming and yelling on the phone for? Oh, I thought he was going to hurt me. Well, did he? No, my friends came over and saved me. Then why did you call me? I mean, that's where I'm on the inside. So that happened a number of times where she tried to get me to be really raw, and I wouldn't buy into it. I just refused to buy into her. Well, long story short, she finally dies. We never receive a penny. What ends up happening is one of the lawyers who worked for the lawyer that George went to happened to be going to India. He was Indian. And he had actually said, let me listen into some of the phone calls, and she refused to do it. So he went over to India to find out all the paperwork and everything. And he found the legal documents, but there were like 20 other legal documents with other people's names on them. They were just, and that's when he was like, India is one of the most corrupt countries. It's $10 and you got a document that looks legal. So he went to this one huge palace that she said she had that had 40 bungalows on the beach, and they showed pictures and everything. I mean, documents and everything. And there was a guy who said, "What are you talking about?" Like he had been there, it was like in his family for generations. He's like, "I don't even know who you're talking about." And the passport she had, we don't know if it was real or not. It was incredible. But that's what I was thinking about when it comes to corruption and pollution. It just got more and more and more. And towards the ends of her life, we knew she was dying. I'd go over every once in a while and take all the alcohol out of her house. I'd go back the next day, there was alcohol back in the house. She would just get people to go buy her alcohol and then hide it because she knew I'd find it. And I'd always find it. "Oh, but you don't understand, I need you." And she'd be crawling on her hands and knees to go get her alcohol. Again, I'm attempting not to judge her. Most of my upset is, how dare you take advantage of George at Omega Vector? That's where my upset was. So I got protective. And in that, I lost my compassion. And I lost my commitment to George that I would surrender. I lost it because I got defensive and protective of George at that point. So before she died, I understand what had happened. There was a gentleman who was living in the complex as her. He came over and helped her shred every piece of paper in her house. She had a fax machine and a shredder, so there was documentations of conversations and whatnot, shredded everything, 3 days. It was 3 days of shedding paper. That's when I said, that's it. Obviously, this woman is not truthful, and this was an event. It was an experience. When she died, I was in the hospital with her. She went into a coma, so it was me and George and her ex-husband, who was going to kill her, but apparently by her side loved her to death. He would do things like, if I gave her $2,000 for a plane trip, he'd go and take it out of her bank account. So sometimes I would think it was him that was on the phone pretending to be the judge. Like, that's where I was like, this is going to be the biggest scam I've ever come across. But anyway, part of me was taken back that George got taken into it. But as I said, being the spiritual man, he may have known something that I didn't know. That maybe something was unfolding that's probably still in the works. Who knows? If it really was a karmic debt, or was something that was indebted to him, maybe Omega will be indebted soon by the process. I have no idea. So I just know that she came into his life with the attempt of manipulating him, and he got manipulated. And that's sad to see when you love somebody dearly and you watch them be manipulated and there's nothing you can do, and him saying to you, it's my experience, my choice. I know what's happening, it's my choice. So, when I go back to this weakness of excuses and lying, that she was nothing but lies and excuses. That's all I ever experienced from her. Same with her ex-husband or anybody else. As a matter of fact, after she died, I got this email from India from this woman. "Oh, so-and-so talks so much highly of you. When will you come out and bestow your wisdom upon us?" And I just sent her an email. "If you want any information, go to www.omegavector.org. Never heard from her again. So, goes back to corruption and pollution. It corrupts your loyalty, so you practice deception and unfaithfulness. And here's something George brought to my attention. Every time we would see her, or every time she would see George, she would break down in tears, just go, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Like there was a part of her that knew that this was wrong. And it was almost like she was being told what to do, because she was quite frightening. I mean, frightful. So intimidated. Like you could tell she was being intimidated by someone else. She did not have the cahoots to come this up on her own. So you knew there was somebody else in play. So her corruption leads her to deception and unfaithful, or other people, and it pollutes your truthfulness so that you live on a highway paved with lies. Now with her, it was easy to see how she would forget what lies she would tell somebody, and because she was drunk, you could see her rambling around and trying to figure out what story she had told you. So when you took a step back, it was actually kind of comical. I wish I would have recorded it, because that actually would be a good TV series, just to see the many lies. Just as the iron filings reveal the shape of the magnet, your thoughts reveal the spirit that lurks just below the surface. Once your loyalty and truthfulness are corrupt, you are drawn to fellowship with liars, takers, abusers, and those who enslave others in devious ways ranging from force to threat to seduction. So once you lose your sense, I was going to say sensibility, but once you lose your sense of truthfulness, we'll just stick with truthfulness, your strength, once you become weak, then you're going to be drawn to these individuals who will make you weaker. In the spirit of deception, if the spirit of deception is guiding your life, there's not a shred of chance that you can change without the transformation of metanoia. Only metanoia can lead you to awakening. So this was George's solution. When you discover the weaknesses that you have, metanoia is the only solution. Now, for those of you who've done Omega-2, you understand what I'm talking about. Those of you who haven't done Omega-2, I'm going to give you a brief, but I don't want to disclose too much. It simply means, we actually talk about this in Omega-1, finding the value of a difficult situation. That's metanoia. Instead of seeing something as horrible, you go the opposite direction and find value. Briefly put, that's metanoia. So to do something other than what you're in the process of doing. So once you discover a weakness, you go in the opposite direction. That will save you. Now, easier said than done. Much easier said than done. To place your life in the care of a spirit of excuses and deception is to give up your sovereignty. Without your sovereignty, you are reduced to a fraction of yourself. So I sat there and thought, sovereignty. George has used this word before. He has a book actually called The Sovereignty of God that he wrote years and years ago, a little pamphlet. So I went to Webster's to find what sovereignty was, and the first thing it said was obsolete. I thought that's funny. So it says obsolete, then it says supreme excellence, or an example of it, supreme power, especially over a body politics, freedom from external control, autonomy, a controlling influence, one that is sovereign, especially an autonomous state. So most of that still went over my head. So I went to mydictionary.com, and that says, sovereignty is an authority given to a state or a state that is self-governing. And I always thought sovereignty went with politics, like a government. So a state is sovereign. I went to Wikipedia just for laughs, not for laughs, for more information. And Wikipedia says that for centuries past, the idea that a state could be sovereign was always connected to its ability to guarantee the best interest of its own citizens. I like that. Thus, if a state could not act in the best interests of its own citizens, it would not be thought of sovereign. Okay, so then if I go back to me then, if I act in the best interest of myself, then I would be sovereign. If I'm not acting in the best interest of myself, then I have no sovereignty. So, simply put, I said it believes that I have the ability to govern myself. Essentially, I'd be able to govern myself. Now, many people would state that they do govern themselves. How many people in here think that they actually govern themselves? Let's see. Oh, there's a half a hand. There's two. Do I hear three? Going once, going twice. All right. Now, when I thought of this, I would have a tendency to agree that I do govern myself. However, I also know about the arrest records and our belief systems. Therefore, I cannot say that I govern myself. Most of my life is reaction, unconscious reaction. I can't possibly be governing myself if I don't know what I'm doing.
How would we define you governing?
Governing meaning I'm capable and aware of what I'm doing. Just like, and all my actions are always in the best interest of myself. Or those around me, like the citizens, that's what it said.
Okay.
So not all times are my actions in the best interest of me or those around me. To lose your sovereignty is to first become a predator and then a terrorist. Here's where George gets a little intense. A true terrorist is one who seeks to destroy another, not just physically, but verbally and with judgment and hate. So not so much on the hate, but I'm fairly aware of judgments. And if I have judgments, then I'm acting without sovereignty, because judgment is not in the best interest of the one I'm judging. So that makes sense. Okay, I'm there. But to say that means I'm a terrorist, I'm not sure I can bite that apple. I don't know if I could say I'm a terrorist. I can judge, but I don't know if I'm intentionally wanting to injure. Because from my own understanding, a true terrorist is someone who intentionally causes injury. Now, is there a distinction between someone who intentionally causes injury and someone who unintentionally causes injury? There may be a distinction in the initiating force. However, the consequences may be different. I think an unintentional injury is easier to repair than an intentional injury. I think an intentional injury carries more weight. When I intentionally want to cause you harm, I think that's more weighted and more, I don't want to say injurious, but a deeper wound is created when I accidentally or unintentionally cause injury. So then, with that thought, I was thinking, okay, well, if I get into a car accident intentionally and injure someone, and I get into a car accident unintentionally, the person is still injured. So then how do I distinguish between that? So this had my mind reeling a lot today. So what I ended up doing was not coming to a conclusion. I'm still chewing on that one. But I don't think I'm going to call myself a terrorist. But he does say a true terrorist is one who seeks to destroy verbally with judgment and hate. And the fact that I do not have hate in me makes me feel like I'm not a true terrorist. I might have aspects of one, but I wouldn't consider myself a true terrorist. He says this is equivalent to losing your soul. And I believe that's true. I have encountered individuals who, for lack of a better term, have lost their soul, where it doesn't feel like there's any goodness within them at all. It's depleting to be around them. Vampires, George would call them. It's depleting to be around them. You just feel drained. It's all about them. They talk about the excuses and whining and complaining or angry, if they're really angry and upset. Have you ever really been around an extremely angry person? Just even being around them can be unnerving. So on that aspect, I would agree with that as well. So then there's people who are equivalent to losing their soul. They've lost their soul. They're soulless. I think about people like, this is not quoted anywhere, this is Anne Marie. Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't understand how that man would have a soul. How do you drill into someone's head because you want to control somebody or eat them? I don't see that can be a soul. I don't understand that as a soul. The gentleman who just killed the 20 kindergartners. I'm not sure if he has a soul or not if you have a mental instability. I'm assuming he would because he had mental instability. But Jeffrey Dahmer was not mentally unstable, at least not clinically mentally unstable. Ted Bundy. And for those of you who know the stories of Ted Bundy, a good-looking, charming, intelligent gentleman. No one ever would have guessed that he was the one that was blowing things up or killing people. So was Ted Bundy the Unabomber? No, who was the Unabomber? Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski. Now, yeah, there's debatable on whether or not he had a soul. He was a questionable characteristic. And then you think of, like I've seen pictures of, who's the dude they found along the Afghan dude? Osama bin Laden. Yeah. I've seen pictures and I look at his eyes. I don't really feel anything there either. I see hatred. I feel hatred. I don't see any goodness in that individual. And then the other man, the Iraq man, you cannot... Saddam Hussein. The same thing. If you look in his eyes, it's a little eerie. Idi Amin is the same thing. For those of you who remember years back, I did a Monday night workshop on the top 10 most injurious people on the planet. I really had a hard time with that because I read through all of the things that people, like Ivan the Terrible. So, and to know that these people existed on the planet was, so those are good examples of soulless individuals. So I guess I could come to the conclusion that there are people who have lost their souls. I'm not sure they're born evil. I'm not sure anyone is truly born evil. Somewhere along the way they lost it. Somewhere along their way their impressions in their life just depleted their energy and they just switched from awakening to unawakening and just continued a spiral of deception, pollution, and corruption. And I'm sure you know that. You may have had an experience where something spun out of control and you couldn't stop it, and all you did was watch it just deplete, and it had to hit before you turned around and went back up again. Occasionally we have that, not all the time. So, again, back to the idea. A true terrorist is one who seeks to destroy another, not just physically, but verbally and with judgment and hate. This is equivalent to losing your soul. You can tell that when one is without a soul, he does not speak of God or good except to gain something for themselves. Now here's where George gets a little tricky. He says it speaks the language. The gentleman can, or someone can speak the language, but he resists the idea of walking in spirit. So you have those individuals who can talk the talk, but when you look at their life, they're not walking it. That's a good example of somebody without a soul. He said that there are true terrorists of the world. They may appear to be good people, but on the inside, they're devoid of spirit, and their life is filled with excuses. So then George says, all right, now what? So who should we fear? And I found that a cute question, because who should you fear? I don't know if we should ever really fear anyone. I mean, if we understood it, everyone who's in front of you is just like me, or there goes someone just like I, another human being on the planet. But I liked his answer. You should fear those who are not awakened. That makes sense. Those who are not awakened, those who are intentionally attempting to manipulate individuals. They've been dehumanized since birth. And that was another quite interesting topic. Dehumanized. So I went over to discover what that meant. It meant to deprive of human qualities, personality, or spirit. And that made me think of the 4 core values. So somebody who is dehumanized, they're not action. Their actions do not speak love, trust, truth, or giving. They're more into greed, selfishness. They're lived by the spirit of excuses and deceptions. They may say great things from time to time, and they may be partly awake, but one such spirit can corrupt a whole nation. They're selfish, impatient, intolerant, angry, and controlling. Now, when I look at this list, I think, okay, well, there's sometimes I'm selfish, and there's sometimes I'm impatient. Intolerant, there are times I'm intolerant, angry. I'd say there's been a few moments in my life I've been angry and controlling. I'm not controlling at all. So, when I look at this, I think, well, wait a second, well, does that mean I'm one of those unawakened people? And I find that offensive. But when I look at it, well, it's true. I don't have awakening at all times. I'm walking around unconscious just like everyone else. Now, that's hard to say. But George says, remember, the discovery of our weakness is our personal growth. So the fact that I'm aware that I have weakness, all right, great, that's a place that I could start from. So I have selfish, impatient, intolerant, angry, and controlling. I'd like you to find someone to sit and chat with, and those are the things I'd like you to talk to them about. Are you a selfish, impatient, intolerant, angry, or controlling individual? Go ahead, please. All right, if I can have your attention, please. By the sounds and the level of talking in here, I'm assuming I'm not the only person who's selfish, impatient, intolerant, angry, and controlling. Is it accurate? Very good, thank you. I'm in good company then. I started to think about this, like, all right, is it really possible that I am the director of an organization and these are my qualities? Not all of them. I thought about the things that I am selfish on. I grew up in a family where I didn't really have much, and whatever I had, my sister always took and broke, or put my clothes on and she was always larger than me, so we'd either stretch out or rip them, so I had to hide my stuff. So I get selfish about my stuff, and that's a challenge for me. And not so much so where we used to have a funny thing when I first started staffing. I loved the fudge-covered Oreo cookies. They don't make them anymore, but they were fudge-covered Oreo cookies. I would bring in 2 boxes, one for the staff and one for me. Not kidding. And you have as much as you want out of that box. This is my box. So yes, that would be a form of selfishness. But now I'm at the point, you know, if I know somebody's wanting some of my stuff, okay, see, I didn't send my stuff. But if, you know, one of the kids is like, oh, can I have those Cheetos? All right, put those dirty hands in there. That's good, then I won't eat them. Thank you. Go ahead, you take them. So there's some things that I've learned to share on, and some things not. Some things I will share with my best friends only. Impatience. I'm really not an impatient individual. I know that that's something I'm pretty good on. When it comes to impatience, I think perhaps maybe the closest thing I can think about with impatience is when I'm affected by somebody who is being impatient. Then I'm impatient that they're impatient. It's like, come on, get it. You know, you shouldn't be, let it breathe, just go. So I guess that's the closest thing I can come to being impatient. But overall, I'm a very...
How's the car driving doing?
What?
How's the car driving?
I solved the problem. I don't drive anymore.
It used to be a regular story.
It was. The morons on the road. and even that, I'm actually very good with the driving on the when I am driving. I'm not very upset anymore about the people who are in front of me. Or, you know, I have practiced driving slower and driving the speed limit and knowing people get mad at me because I'm going too slow now because it's the speed limit is too slow. So that's it's been a nice change. I've been playing around with this. Truly, one of the things that did break me free, sorry Mark, Mark scares the heck out of me when he drives. I'm not used to being a passenger. The major accidents that I've been in, I have been a passenger. So I'm the type of person who slows down when I see a red light. Mark will keep going and then slam on the brakes when we get to the red light. Which I'm not really sure I understand the process of that. So part of my setting me free of being impatient is I'm letting him drive. This conscious choice to sit as a passenger and experience somebody else driving and be at their literal mercy. Those of you who don't know this, a couple of months ago, you saw me with a brace on my arm. We were driving, and I thought we were going to hit the people, so I reached back to get my seatbelt to hang on to, and he slammed at the brakes at the same time, and I rammed my thumb, which I have carpal tunnel, rammed my thumb into the top of the seatbelt thing, so that was very painful. So it's a good lesson to practice patience. So now all I do is just close my eyes. And I wait for the thrusting forward thing. I just say, come on a roller coaster. This is a roller coaster. Enjoy this ride. Every once in a while, I'll just reach over and grab his arm and squeeze, so he knows I'm frightful. So anyway, yeah, I actually have I'm aware of the difference that I feel when I'm driving. Not to say I'm completely over it, but for the most part, I think I'm much better than I was at least 10 years ago. But what I want to say is it's not so much impatience as it is intolerance. I'm intolerant of the stupid drivers in front of me. That I continue to be. Intolerant of someone, are you serious? Do you not think? Hello, what are you doing? So that's intolerance more than impatience. And that's really where my intolerance shows up, is on the driving. Other than that, I'm pretty good on other individuals. When it comes to angry, I'm not sure those of you who might have to tell me whether or not I'm an angry individual, but I don't feel like anger is something that comes out of me. And even if I have an upset, I really don't stew over things. I might have a little, and then I breathe and work through it. So I don't think I hang on to things. When I think of angry people, I think of people who are continuously angry and upset and just have that heavy, I don't feel like I'm that. And controlling, I do have issues of control with my stuff. But other than that, I feel one of the things that George always used to say to me in the organization was, it's not about the task, it's about the person. And I really took that to heart. Even if somebody isn't doing something the way I want it to be done, I'm grateful that someone took an opportunity to take on a task. So that's been another one that I've been working on. So again, all of them I don't have, but there's venues that they do show up in. And remember I said, to be able to look at our weakness but not wallow in the weakness. All right, now I'm aware of it, so what can I do about it? To do constant work on it. And to also know the other aspects of it, like the opposite of impatience is patience. I am predominantly a patience individual, with children especially, very patient with children. You adults, I don't have no much patience for, but I do have a lot more patience. I know I'm aware of that, and tolerance on, compassion comes to play when I think about positive aspects. So you want to have a whole balance. You don't want to just look at one end and not the other. But when I think about this, then I think, well, that's true. When I'm impatient, I'm not awake. I'm not aware of it. I'm reacting. It's an arrest record that flies through. And then I'll have those moments where I'm going, you're reacting again, and laugh about it, and then reset. So I'm glad I have the moments of resetting. That's one thing I was thinking of. When I thought about the idea of excuses and deception, I'm not really sure I came up with a lot of excuses that I had in my life. I know that I've had lies, and almost every lie I've ever taught, I got caught. My younger brother, one time, somebody asked him a question. I don't remember, it may have been you, Pierre, I'm not sure. But somebody asked my younger brother, we're like 12 months apart, really close in age, two middle kids. And somebody said something, asked him if he got beaten as much as I did, and he said, no, Anne-Marie just didn't know how to lie. He was good at lying and I wasn't. He's an actor. And I wasn't. And my lies, I always got caught, so I was not good at lying. So it's never really been a strong suit for me to lie. But recently I catch myself not lying but exaggerating, or like I'll fill in the blank on something. Like if somebody tells me a story, I'll say, well, 12 years ago, when I really don't know if it was 12 years, it was just some time ago. And I don't even know why I throw the 12 out there. Maybe because I want to sound more informative. So it's more like an exaggeration rather than a flat-out lie. But Christopher always would say, oh no, Anne-Marie doesn't know how to lie. She'd get in trouble all the time because she couldn't lie. So I'm glad to hear that. And it is funny that he's an actor now. That's what they do for a living. Lie.
Yeah, he could have lied better during that one NCIS one.
Yeah, he could. Arrogance and ego is his. So, most of us experience the fall from our values when suggestions are impressed on our mind, and many of them from our childhood. So again, I'll attach this to our arrest records. We have an impression impressed on our mind, and we take that as reality rather than what's actually happening. All birds are bad, not true, but I took that because that was an impression on my mind. Impressions of fear and insecurity drive us to insanity. When we have fear, constant and fear and insecurity, it is insane. It robs us of our peace and serenity. The arrest records begin to take hold of us and lead us away from reality. Now, I was thinking about this. To live in a constant state of fear. I've experienced that for the first 16 years of my life. It was constant fear. Every day, what's going to happen? I dreaded school because it was just as bad as it was being at home. So, I had little moments of peace and serenity on the bus ride home, when it was just me and the bus driver, when all the kids were gone, and little moments of peace and serenity when Christopher and I would be hanging out, just the two of us. That would be it. So I understand what it's like to live in a constant state of fear and insecurity. So that makes me think, well, why didn't I go insane? I mean, I should have been insane if that's what my environment was. And then that made me think, okay, well, maybe there's attributes that also have been beneficial to me that impress a different part on my life. Like, I had different experiences, not just fear and insecurity, but there were times where I'd have other experience that almost offset what I was going through. And without sounding like a woo-woo individual, I'll give you a perfect example. How many people had imaginary friends when you were growing up? Imaginary friends. Okay, good. So some of you had imaginary friends. Well, this person that I had, I'm not really sure he was ever my friend, but he was there. There was always somebody there. You want to call him your guardian angel. I really would refer to him as my guardian angel. He would always be there, especially when things were at their worst. I would hear this voice, and always be a guy behind me, talk to me. And typically what would happen is after any beating or something, I'd be in the room crying, and he would say, Anne-Marie, it's only pain. It'll pass. And I'd be like, what? That's so stupid! I'm 7 or 8 years old, and he'd say, sing a song. What? He's like, sing a song. You'll be out of pain if you sing. And I fought and argued, and then he'd start singing. And the stupid song he would always sing would be, oh, give me a song to sing, oh, give me a song to sing, oh, give me a song to sing, and I'll be happy as a king. That's got to be the stupidest song I've ever heard, right? But I just keep hearing it over in my mind, and so I'd start singing, because I knew if I didn't start singing, he wouldn't shut up. So I'd start singing, and I'm like snot coming out of my nose, my eyes, all, and I'm singing about being as happy as I can. And I'm going to tell you, within 3 minutes, I'd be laughing. And I wouldn't be in pain anymore. And it would work. So this friend would always show up to do things like that. So I think that's what kept my sanity, is that I had that friend, guardian angel, whatever you want to call it, was always there to give me those thoughts and remind me of the opposite. It was metanoia. Instead of focusing on the pain, he had me focus on the joy. Because he was right, the pain passed. It would just go. And so I've had many instances of that. And that's what made me think, okay, maybe that's why I'm not insane. Of course, maybe I was insane, and that's why I heard voices. We can go both ways here. Reality just hit. Sorry, you need to take a pill. Okay, so is it the blue one or the red one? All right, so here we are. Back to the idea of arrest records begin to take hold of us and lead us away from reality. Constant upsets separates us from reality and removes us from the changes of awakening. How are suggestions impressed upon our minds? This is something George wrote. I found this very fascinating. When the Twin Towers were destroyed, in a matter of moments, millions of suggestions were implanted in the minds of people. In a matter of moments, millions of suggestions were impressed on the minds of people. Many became afraid to fly. Some people were afraid to go to the post office because of the anthrax, because that was tied to that as well. Many people disliked the Middle East. So millions of impressions just like that from one incident. Catastrophe. Incident, impression. So impressions are passed and impressed upon us, especially when they're connected to fear and insecurity. When you begin to behave in favor of implanted suggestions, you lose your own authority. You lose your sovereignty. So when you begin to believe it is unsafe to fly, that's it, you've lost it. Now, are there times when it is unsafe to fly? Yes! Is it unsafe to fly all the time? No! There's more car accident deaths on the planet than there are airplane deaths in the history of airplanes. So, no, it's not that unsafe to fly. Of course, you know, my father, he's not afraid of flying, he's just afraid of crashing. That's his line. So I've been out here for 27 years, never came to visit me. And it always intrigues me that it's okay with him for me to get on a plane to go see him, but it's not okay for him to come on a plane to see me. That's intriguing. I'm like, oh, you don't mind if I die? Okay, thanks. And he's like, well, you jump out of airplanes anyway, you don't mind? I'm like, okay. Yeah, that makes sense, Dad, thanks. So when you follow your own lies and the lies of others, this can cause you to lose your sense of reality. I was trying to think about a scare that had happened. Do you remember when Orson Welles did the end of the world? What was it called? War of the Worlds. And there was terror thrown right. So this is for you young people. Orson Welles was a radio personality, and well, before he was an actor, he was on the radio, and he had this show, and he had it, the War of the Worlds. The Martians have landed, and they're invading. Now it's on the radio. People are believing it. So there are calls of nationwide panic, because people thought that the Martians had truly landed. So that's a suggestion. People bought into it, and panic arose. Now, that's one of the reasons why, I can say this on a positive aspect, that's one of the reasons why some of the government officials choose not to disclose things because they don't want panic to arise. So there's a positive. We can look at a positive aspect for the political system to prevent panic, because panic can be more detrimental than the actual event. So, for a matter of fact, I think I said this in on New Year's Eve. I think in New Year's Eve there were 60 people trampled in a New Year's Eve event where panic started, and then everyone just ran. I think it was in...
It was in one of the African countries.
One of the...
Ivory Coast.
It was on the Ivory Coast, thank you. It was on the Ivory Coast. There was something happened where somebody started panicking, and then everyone panicked, and 60 people were trampled because of this one initiating event. And then, of course, that happens as well for, I remember when I was growing up, concerts. Nobody wanted us to go to concerts because, you know, some yell fire and everyone runs. I mean, some of you probably are old enough to remember this, that when that first started, somebody would yell fire in the movie theater just to be funny, but then it would ensue a riot, and panic would strike, and eventually somebody would get injured. So when you follow the lies of yourself or others, it can lose the sense of reality and often causes injury. What will happen is you will begin to love the one who hurts you, and you will hate the one who's helping you. When you start losing a sense of reality, you start making excuses for the reason why somebody's injuring you. Oh, well, they had a bad day. Oh, well, they're upset. Oh, well, they didn't mean it. Now, I've worked with a lot of individuals, male and female, same thing, where you make justifies excuse after excuse for somebody who's injuring you, but then when somebody tries to help you, you hate them. Especially when you show them their weaknesses, you're public enemy number one. So that's a reversal right there that happens when you're following your own lies or the lies of others. You will live in a destructive relationship in the name of love. Oh, but I love them. I can make a contribution to them. I know I can change them. I know. Marshmallow eggs won't be a marshmallow egg for long. That's an illusion. We live in that illusion. I can change that marshmallow egg. Of course I can. And you avoid a teacher who's tough, but the only one who will help you awaken. We avoid them. Without your own authority, you have no guidance system. So again, I'm going to connect the authority to your inner voice when you follow that inner voice. So Kelly talked about this today, earlier, to find her inner voice. So without finding that guidance system, we're lost. And that's what we talk about. When an aircraft, they have an automatic pilot. The automatic pilot takes over the instrument and keeps the plane in balance and on course. If the automatic pilot is off course or the instruments no longer work, the plane is called lost. And most of the time it ends up crashing because it falls off the radar. Well, the same is true with us. If we don't have our guidance system, we're lost. That's what happens. We end up being lost. And when we land somewhere, we have no idea where we are. So you lose your point of origin as well. So our guidance system can also be our point of origin. Now, this was an intriguing fact. I really liked when George brought this up. Without your own authority, you are quickly hypnotized. So I thought of that word, hypnotize. you know, the New Age philosophy, they use hypnotism to help you overcome smoking and losing weight and, you know, self-esteem. So I'm not wanting to put it down. There's the positive affirmations, could be a sense of hypnotism. But I'm also thinking about people who use hypnotism for parlor games, you know, and let's do funny things with people. That's taking advantage of other people as well. But hypnotism. But anybody in here ever been hypnotized? Oh, there's a few of you. Excellent. Did it work?
Not so that when I walked in the front of the building, all the man had to say was one word and I was gone.
Wow. And when you went for hypnotism, did it stop?
No, it actually was a comedy show.
Oh, okay. So it was in a comedy show. Anybody go for hypnotism for a problem?
I went for smoking, it did not.
It did not help? Loretta?
I went for a problem, a pretty severe problem,
Uh-huh.
resolution of childhood stuff, and I went to the best.
It
I
didn't
wouldn't
work.
go. I wouldn't go.
No?
He couldn't do it.
Oh, you couldn't get
I
hypnotized.
fought him though.
Oh.
I followed the directions, but
I can't imagine you doing that. So you fought him.
Yeah, mentally.
Yeah,
And
right.
he said it was not really something that he had ever.
Really? He never encountered somebody fighting him?
But he sent me to a woman and she treated me first with me being able to have her come up behind me, and I would have to tell her when I no longer felt safe, and it would be distances.
Uh-huh.
And when she was able to come, I let her come really close, almost touching me. It took a process. Then she said that I would probably respond to hypnotism, which was really exciting. You know. At that point in time, I felt her treatment was
More beneficial.
Was more beneficial for me.
Right.
You know, because it was over. It took several times, but she just decreased the distance between us.
Right.
But I could feel her, and so it was safer.
Okay.
Probably because she was a woman too.
Yeah. All right, and you said you were hypnotized?
Yeah, actually I've done it several times in my life.
And has it worked?
Yes and no. The first time I did it, of course no, it didn't work. And I think partly it was the person, it was who I was at the time,
Mhm.
you know, all that. My mother had been hypnotized for quitting smoking. It worked for her. I wanted it for whatever it was that I was doing, and I don't even remember at the time what it was.
Well, it must have worked.
Yeah, no, it actually didn't. I think it was losing weight probably, but anyway, it didn't work. But then I've done other things where it has worked.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think what you said was right. It depends on the person you were. Yeah.
I had a real trust with that person.
Uh-huh.
So, and the other person was just kind of schmarmy,
Yeah.
I guess. And then I've done the parlor trick one too.
Yeah.
And the person sat there and tapped on my forehead, and I was like, I don't want to be in pain. Well, I wasn't afterwards for that whole night. Of course, I woke up the next morning and but for that night, I literally wasn't, and I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, so yes and no.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I remember when I did it, I was in college, it was like a comedy show thing, so, but they brought the guy to the dorms, and my fiance was with me at the time, and so they had me, we had to put our arm, we were sitting on the floor, and I put my arm out, and, you know, like you're holding a bucket of sand, and then it drops, and then he says, now as light as a feather, and it light. So I'm aware of everything, because I thought when you're hypnotized, you're gone. You don't think, but I was aware of everything. So then he's like, okay, it's a solid pole. You can't feel anything, it's a solid pole. And then he said, okay, Rich, now go sit on her arm. And I'm like, there's no way he's going to sit on my arm. So I've got my eyes closed, and I'm waiting for him to come, thinking my arm is going to drop in a second. And then he says, Anne-Marie, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes, and he was sitting on my arm. I didn't feel it at all. I was surprised, just totally surprised. But then when I saw it, and I thought, that can't be happening, then I dropped him. He wasn't happy. But it was I was amazed, mostly because as I said, I thought I was going to be unconscious, and I wasn't. I was aware of everything that they were saying. Kim?
Isn't meditation a form of hypnosis?
Yes, meditation is a form of hypnotism, yes. So, back to the idea of hypnotism now, the idea of hypnotism. When you begin to be, where did I say that? So, without your own authority, you are quickly hypnotized. Once you are fully hypnotized, you will fight to stay where you are. So once you're fully hypnotized, in other words, once you fully buy into it, nothing's going to break you. You're there, and you're going to fight to stay there. And if somebody tries to tell you the place you are in is incorrect, and you won't believe them, no, you're out, and dismiss people. So, many people are hypnotized by many things, such as social status, styles, fads, even politics, New Age philosophy, and even religions. You can be hypnotized by these certain things. So I did a little bit of research on Facebook. How many people in here are on Facebook? Not everybody good. Woo! I am not on Facebook, you're proud to say. Facebook was launched in February of 2004, so that means we're coming up to just 9 years. Only 9 years has this been on the phenomenon of Facebook. Today, in September of 2012, Facebook reported over 1 billion active users. In September, they reached the billionth mark. That's a billion people on Facebook. Imagine if they're all on at the same time. I mean, that would it jam the system? I don't know. Now, here's the interesting facts about this. And what I went with was social status and social media. Social media has really captured our attention here, where many people are hypnotized by Facebook. So, more than half of the people using Facebook use it on a mobile device, either on a phone or an iPad. So they use it on a mobile device. According to Consumer Reports, in 2011, there were 7 million children under the age of 13 with a Facebook account in the United States. And 5 million under the age of 10, which breaks the protocol. They're not allowed to be under 10. There's 5 million kids at the age of 10 who have a Facebook account. That is amazing. They also said that in January 2009, there's a website called Complete.com ranked Facebook as the most social networking service by worldwide monthly active users. Entertainment Weekly said that it included on the site at the end of the decade the best of list saying, how on earth did we ever stalk our exes, remember our coworkers' birthdays, bug our friends, and play a rousing game of Scrabbleless before Facebook? But it's true. I read one time it was said that Facebook has been, you can stalk somebody now, you can intimidate people on Facebook. Bullying is a big thing on Facebook as well, so there's backlashes starting to happen now with Facebook. Critics such as, there's actually a place called Facebook.detox. Really, I was fascinated about that one. It was like, oh, we have a detox place now. Send this to my grandchildren. They state that Facebook has turned into a national obsession. It's a national obsession. It's an actual obsession now in society, in the United States alone, resulting in vast amounts of time lost and encouraging narcissism. So time lost, I'm going to go with that. I did this report, I think it was a couple of Monday night workshops ago, where it came to the average that 2 to 3 hours a day an employee will be on the internet, either Facebooking or doing some kind of internet personal thing rather than working. 2 to 3 hours a day, employees, and the companies know it, but they consider that's a price they pay to have the employees. So 2 to 3 hours a day lost. Then think about this, all the time, that social time that you could have after work, how many hours you sit in front of a computer Facebooking. How many hours? And then, of course, if it's on your mobile device, that means you can go anywhere and do it. So I can understand, like if you're waiting at the airport, that makes sense to me, right? You're waiting at the airport, that read a book would be better, but okay, if you want a Facebook, fine. But to have it in your hand at all times, that's an obsession, truly an obsession. And then I thought, okay, it says encouraging narcissism. Now, I'm fairly familiar with the word, but I went for it anyway to the dictionary. It says in everyday speech, narcissism is a personality trait characterized by egotism, vanity, conceit, or simple selfishness. Well, that sounds like an unawakened individual. So I think about this on Facebook. Is it about then egotism? Oh, well, yeah, how many friends do you have? How many friends do you have? That's like, I gotta get 1 million friends. I gotta get 1,000 friends. Now, my granddaughter, I have 600 friends. You're 13 years old, or 16 years old. How do you know 600 people? Yes.
There's also just the bad comment. People say that the number of friends you have is equivalent to how much money you make. more friends you have, the more money.
That's funny. That would be hypnotism. So the big thing was about that. I remember the strive to be able to break 100 friends, and then 200, and then 500, and then 1,000. It amazes me that how many, and that scares me to think. So if you have 600 friends, there's 600 people in your life who know what's happening in your life every time you post, and then their friends, if you're friends with them, their friends. I mean, that's just
If they bother to read
insane.
it.
Insane. If they bother to read it.
Yeah, 'cause that's, I have to have the thing, this bugs me that.
Well, I'm sorry, you're in jail, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
He was put in Facebook jail, so that's an issue.
I was in Facebook jail for 3 months. In certain businesses, and Judy and I are bitching about it right now, in my book contract, I have to Facebook,
Right.
and it pisses me off.
That's a good point.
And now I have to Facebook and blog on the Facebook. They said 6 days, I got it down to 1 day a week. And even that noise, but what cracks me up is, there's 2,000, I don't know how many spam. But I'm sitting there going, how many of these people are even looking at?
Well, you never know.
Huh?
You never know.
Well, no, but I mean, I know I don't have 2,000 people every minute going, hey, let's see what Pierre had for breakfast. Especially since I don't tell them what I have. But I look back the other way because they're like, well, the authors have to have this. And so I've got, I don't know, 100 authors on my thing, but none of us are really checking in with each other. So I never know at any time how many people are actually. They have the capability to know, which is scary.
But you know what's really upsetting is that it's in your contract that you have to
That's what ticked me
Facebook.
off.
That's scary.
I have to Facebook, I have to Twitter, and I have to blog. Well, actually, I have to do 5 things, but
Yeah.
Edward fixed it so that I can do it on one and it appears on all, because I said, I don't have time to write if I have to do that crap.
Okay, so back to the idea that it creates narcissism, which I really believe is true. So that's egotism, vanity, conceit, and simple selfishness. So I was working with a client today. She's got low self-esteem, works in this company. The company's paying for her to have coaching. So she was telling me how she's on Facebook and she sees people, oh, that person's pretty, or that person's pretty, but she doesn't see herself as pretty. She's a beautiful woman, doesn't see herself as beautiful. And that's what I thought, that unfortunately that's what's happening is we're comparing to each other. Oh, this person has done that and I haven't done it, or this person does that and I haven't done it. And so it can be a way of actually diminishing your capacity when you read all the things that are available and you're not doing them. So that can be demeaning as well. Then naturally advertising. Then I went to advertising. Hypnotism is in advertising. Those of you may not remember, but there was a time when the TV commercials used to have hypnotic suggestions or subliminal messages. Sometimes they still do. Movies do it too, or they'll play music that, and then there's words in the songs. Join the army. It'll just be out there. So advertises. What they've turned to, the advertising now, has turned to using celebrities. One of the first ones I can remember is Michael Jordan. Everybody remember Michael Jordan? Remember the commercial, I want to be like Mike? And then Nike makes sure, they spend billions of dollars on athletes to make sure they wear Nike shoes. And Michael Jordan took Nike to another level. So you have, and then of course the Coca-Cola commercial with Joe Green. Hey kid, here, and he throws him a Coke. You remember that? Or the sweatshirt, I don't remember. The kid gave Joe Green a Coke, and then he gave him his jersey or something. There's Coca-Cola, using an athlete. So celebrities now are doing advertising for the advertising company. Why? Because we have a bunch of starry-eyed people looking at the celebrities thinking they're God. Oh, if that's what they're doing, then I'll do. Because we want to emulate them. Hypnotized. Hypnotized. I remember when Britney Spears hit the scene. Everybody remember that? Britney Spears hit the scene. It was mostly because my grandchildren were my 3-year-old is dancing to Britney Spears, gyrating. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop, turn that music off right now. I'm looking at her mother. What are you letting her listen to? But anyway, remember when she hit the scene? All the teen boppers wanted to be like Britney Spears. Same thing with Madonna. Remember when Madonna first came out, the rubber band bracelets? Everybody had rubber band bracelets on. It's amazing. Hypnotized. We're just hypnotized. We're following somebody else. Hypnotized. So, that's advertising. Then, of course, I had to use politics. Now, when I think about politics, of course, I've mentioned this already. It's an excellent venue to expose the unawakened individuals. Lying and deceit is expected. It's almost like we just don't even, whatever. We know it. They're just lying and they're deceitful. What I find unfortunate is you have this starry-eyed, hypnotic citizens, believing every word. Oh, they really mean it. Or the ones who are so dedicated. Like, I find a little hard to believe. I'm going to just take a pic. So my brother is a diehard Democrat. And in his eyes, every Republican is evil and wrong, and every Democrat is right and good. I find that hard to believe. How can half the country be evil and wrong, and only Democrats are good and loving, abiding citizens? I don't understand that. And so what I also struggle with is, how does somebody say, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote for every Republican who goes into because they're a Republican? Not by what their values are, but simply because they're a Republican. I find that odd. Just because you're a Republican, that means you classify as good. Like, it's unfortunate that some people don't do the research. And sometimes if you are a Republican, the Democrat might actually be a better candidate, but you refuse to vote for them because they're a Democrat. That's insane, people. Hypnotism. So that to me is very intriguing. Finally, we get to religion. When I think about religion, not to put religion down, religion, faith can be beneficial if you believe in it because of the morality of it. But if you believe in a faith simply out of fear, that's not purity. It's not purity at all. So any faith that's based on fear is impure, that's hypnotic. That's them guiding you to be a certain way. When I think about that, I think about the other venues that we have that hypnotize us. We have advertising. And I think it's so odd and strange to us to me, that the entertainment field makes more money producing nothing when we have the educational system, teachers who barely make money, and they're in charge of the next generation. It seems odd to me. When a sports figure can make more money than a policeman who protects us, that's odd to me. But you know what? That's hypnotism. That's it's more important. Oh, it's more important to see a football player. You know how much a Super Bowl ticket costs? $2,500 for one of the basic. Yeah, $2,500 for a Super Bowl ticket that you can watch on TV. But just to be there, really? That to me is amazing. It's absolutely amazing when I think about that. So I think about our society, and again, not to put things down, looking at the whole perspective, because also in recent events we have seen compassion show up. We have seen generosity arise, especially with the Superstorm Sandy. How much came back to the East Coast? I was so moved when I read an article about people from when Katrina happened. So when Superstorm Sandy occurred, the firemen from Louisiana went up because they said people from Hoboken came down, so they went back to repay the favor. That's moving to me. I saw a beautiful little video on, those of you who know goodnews.com, the Good News Network, I think it is. It's a beautiful website. They send out an email every week, and it tells you the top 10 stories of good news, people doing good for other individuals. And so there was a video in there of a gentleman who was being Santa Claus for the Rockaway because they lost everything out there. So he asked the parents, tell me one thing that your child likes, and people started sending in donations and money. He had more toys than he could give away. That, to me, is humanity coming together, compassion coming together. So again, we have our positive and we have our negative. The idea is, for me to find a weakness, if I find a weakness within me, first of all, to discover the weakness, to not have denial. There are people who deny, I don't have any weakness, I'm fine, I'm not controlling. Everyone knows that, right? I'm fixing the paper. I'm not controlling.
About this one off.
Yeah.
Just one thing I wanted to add, if I can quickly throw it in, is that with the high technology these days, even the price that people pay to go to ball games is actually more about being around people. People crave high touch with the highest technology, so it's like just to be in a space where there's crowds, people crave that just to be together.
Right.
Because it's all isolated.
Well, I think the Super Bowl is more about the Super Bowl. Oh, it's not the Super Bowl, as opposed to any football game. But that could be a good thing. I went to my granddaughter's soccer game a month ago, and I was intrigued to see how how a soccer stadium, and they have, the field, so they have the visitor side and the home side. The home side and visitor side was on the same side. Nobody sat on the other bleachers. And there was like a handful of people, that was it. And I thought, where are all the parents? Why isn't anybody out here cheering? And then I looked around in the crowd, and half the people were on their phones or on their iPads. They weren't even paying attention to the game. I'm like, why are you even here? What's the deal? So I was intrigued by that, on how so that's a good note, Kelly. Our society is becoming less in contact with each other. We're more about the internet. Yeah, and I struggled for a while about doing YouTube, because that's what we're doing now. We're putting these up on YouTube, because one point was, well, if people can go on YouTube, then why come here? You just watch it on YouTube. So why bother coming down to the Monday night workshop? So that's half my struggle on whether or not to do it, but I also know there's people who are out of state that literally can't be here. So this gives them an opportunity to still participate in the Omega workshops without a great expense. So it's got its positives and its negatives. Same thing, that's what we want to look at. When I think about weakness, I think that weakness is a product of unawareness. We've pretty much captured that. It's a product of unawareness. Once we become aware of our weaknesses, we have an opportunity to implement metanoia, and we can free ourselves from the world of the hypnotic existence. If we can flip ourselves and find the positive versus the negative, and awaken and realize reality versus illusion, then we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to be free. I was thinking about the movie Soylent Green. Anybody remember that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was also another one called Logan's Run.
Yeah.
So Logan's Run was at the age of 20, I think it was. The people, it was either 20 or 30, you would go to this place and your body would be lifted and everyone would be around and you'd be zapped and everyone would cheer because you moved on to the next stage. But what they were really doing were killing people because of the population. There was too much population on the planet. And so they tried to convince everybody that that's the thing to do, we're going to move to the next stage. And it became that's a hypnotic society. And of course, Soylent Green. Those of you who remember this movie, Charlton Heston. So overpopulation, and what they decided to do for the overpopulation is the people who were dying, they put them in this nice room, and they showed them pictures of rolling green grasses and wind and mountains, and the people would die, and they shipped the body off to the food factories. You got a package of Soylent Green, yeah, it was that. So again, hypnotic society. We can believe sheep, just put them everywhere. And then, of course, if you look through history, one very obvious event, which I can easily take, is Germany.
Yeah.
When Hitler came to power. There you have a bunch of sheep, hypnotic. I mean, you have to be hypnotic to intentionally shoot somebody who's armless, not armless, weaponless, not armed, no, weaponless individual. Just shoot an unarmed individual. That's insanity. How do you do something like that? But they're believing. And then George used to talk about this. When he was in the Air Force, he was shipped over to Korea. He was in the Korean War. And on his way over, he was on a ship. They didn't fly back then. I don't think the planes could make the distance, so he was on a ship. And on the ship, day and night, they showed propaganda. We have to go kill those Koreans. Otherwise, they're going to come to this country, they're going to kill your mothers, rape your sisters, destroy them. We have to kill, have to kill. Propaganda, 24 hours a day. By the time he got there, he hated them. Because that's what was fed into him. So it's very easy to hypnotize, very easy to hypnotize an individual from awakening to unawakening. And to believe that irrational reality rather than a real reality. It's very easy. So again, the last thing I just have to say is not to disdain it, to simply be aware of it. Does it exist? Yes, it's going to exist. It's part of humanity. It's ever since humanity has been walking, corruption has been right next to us. Can I say that accurately? I don't know. I haven't been through it, all humanity. My existence, ever since my existence, there's always been corruption as well as positive. So my job is to remain aware, or attempt to be aware. And if you can capture awareness, stay aware. See how long you can be aware. But again, once you find the weakness within you, that's the first step. Find the weakness, to honesty on find the weaknesses. And once you have your weaknesses, then you've got a place to start. You've got a good point of origin. So that's all I have for this evening. Thank you so much for sharing and participating. We will see you in 2 weeks. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you.